Well, unfortunately, since this was also on HBO Max for its first 30 days, this franchise couldn't really resurrect its box office success. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. Today we're talking about a release I'm a little late to discuss, The Matrix Resurrections. Before we begin, let me know in the comments what your thoughts on this movie were, if you already saw it, or if you were planning on seeing it, and make sure to hit that thumbs up button if you like these reviews, as it helps me out immensely by getting my content out there. And if you're new here, I hope you consider hitting that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with reviews of new releases, older films, hidden gems, and so much more on a near daily basis. But let's not waste any more time and let's talk about The Matrix Resurrections. This once again stars Keanu Reeves as Thomas Anderson, aka Neo. To find out if his reality is a construct to truly know himself, Mr. Anderson will have to choose to follow the White Rabbit once more. This time, Lana Wachowski goes solo, with this being her first film behind the camera without her sister Lily, and this is the fourth film in the Matrix franchise after 2003's Revolutions. And it was a film that, upon it being announced, I was surprised we were getting, especially considering, spoilers if you haven't seen Revolutions, that our two main characters die, and it was made quite clear that they are dead. Now, I haven't seen the original trilogy in quite a bit. I did want to watch all three of them in the lead up to this movie, but I just did not have the time. But I do distinctly remember they made a big deal out of both Neo and Trinity dying. It was not left ambiguous, so I was a bit confused how they were going to approach this, seeing as how, as the title suggests, they're both resurrected here, with the trailers not cluing us in as to how that was possible. Which does at least eventually get explained, though not till well into the movie. Before that though, we do at least ease into things with a meta first act involving Anderson back in the Matrix, working on a new Matrix video game that's influenced heavily by his time spent in the first three movies. And this is meant to parallel the making of the original three movies as well as this film, with some direct references to Warner Brothers. And I found this to be a fun little introduction back into this world. While sometimes it can feel a bit too on the nose, complete with characters nearly mugging at the camera as they essentially make it clear they know what they're in, it was done well enough for the most part. And as we get eased back into things, the film makes it clear that this is going to be at least partially a love story, centered around the reunion of Neo and Trinity, the latter played again by Carrie-Anne Moss, and whom initially doesn't remember Neo. And it was nice to see both Reeves and Moss, who are charming as ever, step right back into their classic roles without feeling like they skipped a beat. Like the other films, their chemistry was stellar as always. They're both instantly likable, especially Reeves, since his reputation as one of the nicest people in Hollywood shines through a lot more in his recent performances, and they provided a lot of the film's heart. And this time they're joined by a number of new faces, most notably Jessica Henwick as a character named Bugs, who's the captain of the crew that Neo reconvenes with outside of the Matrix. Plus, we get a number of reinterpretations of returning characters, most notably Yahya Abdul-Mateen II is now Morpheus, while Jonathan Groff is now Agent Smith. And everyone does a fine enough job, with the always reliable Mateen giving an extremely charismatic performance, while Henwick was especially a welcome addition, acting as the audience surrogate. We also now have Neil Patrick Harris as Anderson's therapist, who was heavily featured in the trailers and who we do suspect is up to a lot more than he initially lets on. And while there were aspects to his character that I thought were a bit clunky, I thought that he, like many of the other actors, gave a charismatic performance. And to go along with all this, the visuals and action scenes were pretty solid. While not quite as groundbreaking as the original's notable moves, the action scenes here are slick and stylish, all choreographed well. Plus, similar to the first act, there are plenty of callbacks to notable moments within the original films that I'm sure fans will get some kick out of. And if there's one thing I'll give the Wachowskis credit for in general, is the attention to detail when it comes to immersing us into these worlds, and that's again the case here, as there's some nice attention to detail when revisiting this cyberpunk-inspired universe. But as for the rest of the story, once we get past the initial run of meta jokes, that's where it starts to lose me. A lot of the satire that Wachowski tries to inject, as well as the aforementioned love story, winds up getting lost in a sea of exposition-heavy sequences that don't quite amount to a compelling story. The film had this here we go again approach to it, with the way it tried to recreate and reference a lot of these classic moments, but with a different spin. And sometimes that can be fun. In a day and age where you have other big blockbusters that continue classic properties that play heavily into nostalgia, it's clear that stuff like that can be done well and can make for a great movie, like with Spider-Man and Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters. And I appreciate how this does try playing into the audience's nostalgia while injecting this personal spin from Wachowski, who draws parallels from her own experience with Warner Brothers. And for some, that may be enough for them to say that they're on board with this. I know there are quite a few people who say they really enjoy this. The problem is, all of this is interspersed with this new story that tries catching us up with everything that's happened since the events of the original trilogy, and it's explained to us how all these characters are alive, and how these other characters are different, and there's all these other new major players and events. And at least for me personally, it's just a lot to take in, and it causes this to venture off in way too many different directions, and at times it feels like it explains more than it plays into our emotions. Now, it's clear they're trying to play into our emotions between Wachowski's direction and all the performances, and I get that when it comes to The Matrix, it typically involves a dense story. And for some hardcore fans of the series, they may be totally on board with this. But a lot of the time here, as much as there were some heartfelt moments, it felt like it was doing too much exposition in service of something compelling. It tells us what everyone's been up to without really explaining how we're moving forward. And it results in what feels like a compilation of The Matrix greatest hits, just repackaged and now with not quite as much of the emotion as much as it tries. And I know you can make the case for some of those movies that I mentioned earlier that do kind of something similar to this, but for me, it just did not quite connect. And it's a shame because this clearly was a sincere effort, and sometimes sincerity can go a long way. There have been times a story feels so generic, yet the warmth exuded by the performers and the filmmakers would be able to push past its by-the-numbers feel and make for an overall enjoyable experience. But here, the story didn't even feel quite so clear to me, so it was considerably difficult for that sincerity to push past that and make up for it. While The Matrix Resurrections is a commendable effort, it ultimately misses its mark for me. While I appreciate its callbacks to the original, as well as the personal feel by Lana Wachowski, the story just did not feel like it came together, and whatever was cohesive felt like nothing more than a hollow greatest hits. While Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss are delightful, as are some of the new faces, it's not enough to salvage this for me, unfortunately. The Matrix Resurrections gets a 4.5 out of 10. So let me know, did you see The Matrix Resurrections, or are you planning to see it, and what were your thoughts? Did you really like this one? Did you really hate this one? Were you somewhere in the middle? Let me know in the comments below so we can discuss. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and share it, and for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching everyone, and keep having fun with film.